I was about 11 years old at the time and I was home alone on a school day. I had begged my father the night before to let me skip school, and I was not in the mood to sit through 8 hours of class. So, I faked being sick and my father allowed me to stay home. My aunt was at work, so I had the house to myself. So, in all of this together, I got to spend a school day in my 3-story house, all by myself, at 11 years old. I thought I was the boss. It was around 10:30 in the morning when I was suddenly awoken by a commotion downstairs. Me being a naive, incoherent 11-year-old, I thought, hey, my aunt stopped by during her lunch break. Cool. So I turned back over, and for the next 5 minutes I attempted to fall back asleep. But the noise continued. So begrudgingly I yawned and arose from my bed to go downstairs and greet her. But I needed to go to the bathroom first. Rubbing the crust from my eyes, I practically sleptwalked to the bathroom. I did my business, then, as soon as I flushed the toilet, I heard what sounded like someone take off downstairs. Like, it legit sounded like someone ran into the door rushing to get out of there. That woke me up. It was then that I completely turned into a horror movie cliché. I became the exact person who I, upon seeing on television, would curse out and throw popcorn at. I quietly went downstairs to check out what the hell was going on. I think I knew something was wrong, but being the idiot that I was, I still wanted to see what that noise was. So I got to the 2nd floor landing and creeped around the corner to look downstairs and saw the back door wide open. And I froze. Like I actually froze for a solid 25, maybe 30 seconds. And then it started to click. I went from confusion to fear. My heart rate picked up, my breath shortened, my eyes started to well up. Then I took off upstairs into my room, locked myself in, and barricaded myself in by shoving my bed in front of my door. I hid behind the opposite side of the bed and practically had a mini panic attack before searching for my phone and calling my dad. I know, not even 911 first. Jesus Christ, I was fucking stupid. Upon picking up, I quietly asked whether he came over. No, he was at work. Did he know if my cousin's husband stopped by? No, not that he knew of. Why? I told him and he practically blew up. Call the police. I stayed in that spot behind my bed until the cops came. According to them, the thief was only able to grab a laptop and a few other things before, they think, he took off after hearing me upstairs. After that, my dad installed a security system and changed all the locks. Back then, it never really hit me the severity of what had happened. But now, 12 years later, I realize how fucking stupid I was and how I made a shit ton of mistakes that could have cost me. The thing that frightens me the most, though, is the fact that whoever it was probably knew my aunt and I's schedule so well that they were brazen enough to break in the morning. And here's the reason I think this. Our neighborhood is nice, the houses aren't super spread out, and it never screamed, "Hey, rob me, this house is an easy target." I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking. Whatever, although I never actually came in contact with the person, it still scared the shit out of me. And every so often I can't help but look back and wonder, what if I hadn't had to use the bathroom? It has been speculated amongst my family that the robber could have been one of my cousins that has had a few brush-ins with the law, but we never found out. I was 12 when this happened. Usually my younger brother, who would have been 10 at that point, and I would walk home from the bus stop after school. Both of our parents worked and we would spend a few hours home alone together before my mother got home from the senior center she was working for. We did fine on our own, and by then I knew how to cook safely, how to keep the house locked up, and the neighbors usually kept an eye out for anyone near the property, etc. Normally, my little brother would be a bit ahead of me and make it to the house first, But this particular day, he had taken the bus to a friend's house. I walked home and into the house and went straight to the bathroom, as was my daily routine after school. After washing my hands, I moved into the kitchen to find a snack. At this point, it hadn't even occurred to me that I didn't have to use the key to open my front door. The house was always locked when I got home. The only excuse I can make for this is that I was a teenager and I was just glad to be out of school. So, completely oblivious, I make myself a sandwich and sit down at the kitchen table to eat. A couple minutes pass, I'm feeling pretty damn good to be home and enjoying my ham and cheese when I hear a noise at the back of the house. It sounds like a couple of footsteps. At this point, I start to freak out a bit and try to remember if the door was locked when I came in or not. I couldn't remember. I begin making my way slowly towards the back of the house where the sound is coming from. I hear it again, a couple of shuffling steps, and then silence. There's someone in the back bedroom, which is my room, moving around. I sit completely still for a few seconds, trying not to make any noise to alert the intruder or let them know that a 12-year-old is home alone in the house. I hear the footsteps again. Whoever this person is, they didn't sound like they were in a hurry, so I figured they must not have realized I was there yet. I carefully made my way out into the yard. I ran as soon as my feet were off the porch and got one of the neighbors to come back over with me. He was a friend of the family that lived really close and kept an eye on our place a lot of the time. He tells me to go into his yard and wait there. I have a clear view of my house from his yard, and he tells me to call 911 if he isn't back outside within 5 minutes. I waited in his yard for probably 2 minutes before I started thinking that he must be dead or dying or something, and I was debating on whether or not to call the cops when my neighbor comes out of my front door with some guy I've never seen before. He has this guy's arms behind his back and is holding him. He shouts at me to call the cops, and I do, telling them what happened. They showed up and they took the guy away. Turns out, he was wanted in another county for breaking into multiple houses while people were away at work, vacation, that sort of thing. I'm just glad it all turned out well. This encounter happened right after New Year's of 2011 when I was 17 and still a senior in high school. My parents had gone out of state to visit my grandparents, but I was taking a pretty rigorous course load and had exams and papers coming up, so I couldn't exactly afford to miss the classes and go with them. I had never been allowed to stay home alone with both parents being gone for so long, never more than a couple of days, and my siblings were usually there with me. My parents were gone for 9 days, and the night before they returned, shit got real. Having always been a night owl, it was perfectly normal for me to be awake at weird hours like 2 or 3 a.m., just as I was on the night in question. I was sitting in my bed, texting a good friend of mine who's also a night owl and browsing the internet when 3 of our Labradors started barking like crazy. My family lived on 10 acres in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, in a pretty wooded area, so I just assumed they had seen a deer or a raccoon or something. The dogs quieted down, so I didn't think anything of it for about 5 minutes. And then I hear what sounds most oddly like the window in the bedroom below mine opening. I have a split-level house for those who are wondering how I could hear that. I think to myself, you're just tired and psyching yourself out. That lasted for just a moment because I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. The stairs were directly next to my room, with the stairwell opening up right next to the door of my bedroom. I reached over to my door, not making a sound, and locked it. Afraid to make any noise, I asked the friend I had been texting to call 911 because there was someone in my house. My bedroom was near the living room and kitchen, so I could hear this intruder just trashing the kitchen, pulling open drawers, cabinets, tearing open a trash bag and emptying it on the floor. The 911 operators called my cell phone, but I was too afraid to answer. Thankfully, my friend stayed on the line with them and we answered all of their questions through him. Did I have a weapon in my room, etc. I could hear the rustling slow down as the creeper moved a bit further from me into the living room. I hear steps retreat down the stairs again, and then silence. No dogs barking, no window opening. It must have been left open for the duration of this. About 40 minutes of sitting, not alone, scared, crying. After the initial 911 call, the police finally arrived. I know, 40 minutes. They tapped on my bedroom window, which scared the shit out of me, and then I walked to the front door to let them in. A detail that concerns me the most about letting the police in. When I did, the security alarm started blaring. It had been armed the entire time. Another odd detail. The window that I heard open was the only entrance to the house that didn't have an alarm sensor. It had recently fallen off because of the weak adhesive. Nothing was taken, just sorted through, and a few days later one of the neighbors called the police out for a similar incident. Truthfully, I don't know why my parents left me home alone because there had been a string of break-ins in the relative area in the weeks before. To my knowledge, there was never an arrest made in any of these cases. This experience happened in July of 2015. To give some background to this story, I live in a small town in California just 20 miles from the coast, and it is considered one of the safest and friendliest towns in the state. Crime is usually rare, besides the usual teens caught smoking weed or drinking alcohol. But what I experienced that night was an experience that I will never forget. I am a 17-year-old male, recently graduated high school, and soon going into college. Because it is summer, I finally have the rare chance and freedom to do whatever I want all day without worrying about schoolwork, and I also have the freedom to stay up all night if I want to. Anyways, one day, my parents told me they were going to leave the house in the morning and not come back until the next day. Meaning, I had the house to myself all day and all night. My mom was getting surgery and was staying overnight, and my dad decided to stay with her in the hospital. I was really excited that I had the house to myself for 24 hours, because I never did before. But what happened made me wish my parents were there. As usual, all I did was watch TV, play video games, and be unproductive all day, basically my summer experience. When night rolled around, I was still playing Xbox until around 11 p.m. when things got weird. Now, to give you a few more backgrounds, my family has 2 indoor cats. Both are extremely friendly until something happens outside. Whenever there is a bird, raccoon, person, stuff like that, they get excited and their feline instincts kick in and they immediately rush to the window and start meowing and growling. They growl especially if someone is at the door. Don't worry, all this information will be relevant for later. I'm not just saying this for no reason. So, back to the story. It was close to 11 at night when I was still on my ass playing Call of Duty, of course. The noise volume was fairly low, so I heard a few taps coming from the general front door area, like light footsteps and small scraping noises. My cats suddenly bolted from another room in the house. I paused the game and looked over and saw my cats were walking around excitedly with their tails pointed up and their ears perched. Although my hairs stood up as well, I simply dismissed the noise as a rat or maybe a raccoon, either in the front yard or the roof. Because we have so many and I hear them all the time, especially at night. Also, I was too engaged in my game to know where specifically the sounds came from, so I just assumed the roof. A few seconds later I returned to my game, although my cats were still clearly nervous and excited. I almost forgot about the sounds a few minutes later when I heard it again. This time, louder. Now sounding more like something hard shuffling across our stone-paved front yard from the front door area. My cats quickly sprinted to the window that overlooked the yard and started to meow excitedly and occasionally hiss. This time, I knew something was definitely there. I paused my game again and went over to the window where my cats were at to see what was there. I expected a deer or maybe a coyote, since rats cannot make that type of sound and the noise only came from outside the door, not the roof. I peered out but saw nothing, since it was very dark. Coming back to the television, I was a bit more creeped out than before. I decided I didn't want to play any more Xbox since my hairs were standing up and shivers were spreading through my body. Besides, I have already played enough today. Being 6'4" and weighing 200 pounds, I felt like a dumbass and a pussy for being afraid of a possible deer. I decided I would brush my teeth and go to bed. Before I went into the bathroom, when I was just standing there thinking of all this, crazy shit happened. My cats heard it before me. Both of them ran to the front door, one of them growling like I have never heard before. A split second later, I heard it. Heavy shuffling footsteps right outside the door, and then in a split second, the automatic lighting for the front porch turned on. Now, this time, I knew it was a person for sure. Only a human can make obvious footsteps like that, and the automatic lighting only turns on for big objects, like people. There was no knock or doorbell ring, but the front door is loose on its hinges, and if you slightly push it or nudge it, the door rattles. That is exactly what happened, and that rattle terrified me to the bone. Just knowing that I was home alone, in the dark, except for my TV screen with footsteps and automatic lights turning on outside, gives me a feeling of terror that I will never forget. My cats were going absolutely crazy at this point, meowing, hissing, growling. Although every single muscle in my body told me to get away, curiosity got the best of me and I quietly snuck to the door. If you enter my house, you would enter the mudroom, which is just a closet and a place to put shoes, and then would have to turn right to a former doorway, now without a door, to enter the living room, where I was. Also, my door is not a fully wooden door like most people have, but instead have decorative glass in the place where the panels should be. Anyways, I snuck up to the mudroom and peered around the empty doorway to indeed see through the glass a figure of a person standing there. I cleared my throat and mustered up the courage to ask, "Who the fuck are you?" The figure bent down and cupped his hands to his face and peered through the decorative glass. The terror swept me again, with my throat tightening and shivers spreading across my body. Because I was in such shock, I hardly remember the facial features of the person except that it was a thin-faced African-American guy. We stared at each other for a few seconds, and his expression turned into a scowl, like disappointment that I was home, and in a second, this guy was gone. I could hear the fast-paced steps of shoes against the stone as this guy ran off. About 15 seconds later, I heard a vehicle turn on and a screech of tires as he drove off. My terror turned into warm, sweet relief as I knew this guy was gone. My cats finally stopped acting so crazy and, just like two cute little kittens, just forgot about it, walked to whatever corner of the house, lied down, and started sleeping like nothing ever happened. I called my dad immediately, and when it was ringing, I thought of what I should tell him. When he picked up, I hesitated on telling him what had just happened. I don't know why. Maybe it was just because I didn't want him to deal with a house burglar and police while still having to deal with my mom just waking up from a surgery in pain. So I didn't tell him, and never did tell him, or my mom, what I experienced that night. I didn't want my parents to worry, especially because they were on the overprotective side. My theory of who this guy was and what he was doing is that he was scouting the neighborhood and looking for empty driveways so that he could somehow break into a house and steal whatever he could find. Since our car was gone and I was home alone, he probably thought there was nobody home. I'm guessing the shuffling and light footsteps the first two times when I thought it was a rat or a deer was him hesitating or something, and on the third time he found the courage to look through our glass panel. Finally, when he heard me, he became curious and looked through the glass. However, when he saw me, he figured out he couldn't rob the place because I was there, so he bolted and drove away. Again, this is just my theory. I really have no idea what that guy was up to. The important thing is that I have never seen or heard of this guy again, and I'm relieved that he will hopefully never visit our house again. Actually, now that I think about it, I wish he would come back so I would be waiting with a baseball bat to show him who the fuck he's messing with. I'm still angry at myself that I reacted in such fear and terror, and I promise I would react differently if that would happen again.